Hey everybody, my name is Matt. I'm one of the owners of Mysterious Galaxy, and today I have the privilege of having Aaron Phillip Clark here with me, along with Curtis Ippolito, and we're going to be talking about crime fiction. So um, let me briefly go over the run of the not house. It feels weird saying these things virtually still. The run of the crowdcast. So if you want to talk and say something nice, there is the chat bar to your right. Feel free to talk there. If you have a question for either of the authors, down below there's the Ask a Question tab. Feel free to drop your question in there. And if you see some question you like, you can upvote it and we'll make sure that we get to that one first. And of course, after you hear Curtis and Aaron talk, you're going to want to buy the books. So make sure that you go to the button below that says signed book plates available, and you'll be able to buy both books from the authors and any back stock, past books. I can't find my words there for that one. Um, that Aaron has written. Um, because Curtis, who is our intrepid moderator today, is a debut author as of last year, and his book is almost won. He wrote Burying the Newspaper Man, and he's a San Diego native. And then we also have Aaron Phillip Clark, whose book Under Color of Law, should have practiced that. Um, we're celebrating today, and he has 3 other books out. And that is my very brief little intro for both of them. I'm going to get out of the way because I think that's all I have to say right now, and I will be back at the end.
All right, thank you.
All right. Hey, Aaron, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Great to see you. We met, what was that, December at Noir at the Bar in LA.
Yes, December. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great event. It's very cool to meet you. And you were one of the few authors I've met in the real world since this pandemic's been going on. So very cool to hang out with you then.
Yeah, it was a great night, and I think that was it was interesting because that night it was quite a few of us SoCal authors in the house, um, which was kind of cool. So it was nice to see everyone's. And most people had written about Los Angeles or at least Southern California, so it was kind of cool to see everyone's take on that.
Yeah, for sure. So I just got done finishing Under Color of Law, probably about a month ago, and it was just incredible. Loved it.
Thank you.
I can't wait to dig into it and talk a little bit more about it with you tonight. Do you want to start off and tell people a little bit about your catalog before Under Color of Law and just kind of what led you to this book?
Sure. So my first novel was The Science of Paul. And so that was written as my thesis, excuse me, in grad school. And so I was able to get that published, I believe, in 2011. And so that was published by New Pole Press, which at the time was headed up by John Bassoff, who was a crime author and horror author in his own right. And it's interesting because that indie press had quite a few like horror books, and I think my book kind of stuck out. But I appreciated the spirit of the press because, it was kind of like anything kind of goes, And I think for my first book, I needed that kind of freedom because I'm pretty sure had I went with a larger publisher, they would have had some edits and some suggested revisions for it to be a little more commercial, but that launched the Paul Little series. And so Healthy Fear of Man was the second book that came out featuring Paul Little. And then after that I had The Furious Way, and which was a standalone, very pulpy standalone novel. And then Under Color of Law, which is loosely, and I say loosely, inspired by my time in the LAPD Police Academy. So,
That's awesome. I've heard you talk a little bit about that before in a couple of podcasts. Do you want to give everyone kind of the, I don't know, like a 1 minute overview of your time there?
Sure. So, I went in 2014. It was, to my knowledge, I might have been the first published author to go in to the academy. And at that time of my life, I had a different kind of viewpoint in terms of law enforcement, and I really thought that I could be kind of a change agent in the department. Things didn't necessarily work out that way. I think they worked out for the best, but I was unable to finish the academy on account of injury. And then it took me a little while to really process kind of all I experienced and all I went through in the academy. But once I did that, I was able to really sit down and write Under Color of Law.
Yeah, you mentioned that idea of being an agent of change, and that shows up in Under Color of Law a few times with the main character, Trevor, and his motivations to join the force, but then also the victim, the LAPD recruit, joined to do that very thing. Did you just draw those experiences from your own? Was that easy to do because you had that experience?
I think so. I mean, I think there's a level of idealism for most of the recruits in there. One thing I can say is that, police officers are not monolithic. People went in to the academy for many reasons. There was a lot of things in people's backstory. Police are not, just seen as hopefully not just seen as bullies, right? Just people with badges and guns. But ideally, I wanted to show them in my novel close to what I experienced, which was human beings who had all different, motivations for wanting to become police officers. And, there's a plethora of folks in there. And, I think if anything, I won't say for everybody, but for most people, they went in idealistic, wanting to do the right thing and have some impact, some positive impact, I should say, on their communities.
Yeah, for sure. So you want to back up a little bit and kind of we can talk through how we both steered our lives to being writers.
Sure. For me, it started early on. And so, originally I thought I would be a visual artist. I love to draw. And so that kind of became the gateway to wanting to create comic books. And so I was pretty sure, early on that's what I was going to do. I was going to, I was a decent drawer, visual artist, and I really enjoyed writing and I enjoyed creating stories. And so that's where I thought I was headed. But over time, kind of the writing took over, and I guess I kind of lost I won't say my love, but maybe the flair for visual art. And, throughout high school, I mean, I went to kind of a standard fare kind of high school that had like an advanced art program. I think maybe things might have been different had I went to a creative arts high school. I probably would have stuck with visual art. But, having gone to kind of a typical high school where, art was not the focus by any stretch of the imagination. And so, they didn't know what to do with me. So they just kept putting me in, the advanced art classes. And after a while, I was like, well, I'm just taking the same class over and over. There's no place to matriculate, so I kind of just let it go. Yeah. And just focused on the writing.
Nice. Yeah, for me, it was kind of just happenstance. I went into college thinking I was going to be a marine biologist.
Oh, wow.
And turns out I suck at math and I suck at science. So I looked at what I could do. And I always got straight A's in English and always enjoyed writing essays and things like that. And so I changed my major to journalism. Okay. And was a newspaper reporter out of college once I graduated for a couple of years in Dallas. Did that for 2-3 years, and then along with everyone else in 2008, got laid off
Mm,
and just kind of floated around and did a lot of retail and manual labor jobs. And then actually got kind of rescued from a college friend who went to journalism school with me. She called me up one day and said, "Hey, I'm working at this children's hospital and they need a writer. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Sure." And kind of
mm,
breathed a second life into my writing career, and really went on the marketing tract of writing,
yeah.
and dabbled with fiction here and there, but nothing too, you know, obviously impactful or successful. And then it wasn't until I wrote this book, Burying the Newspaper Man, that I really found my love of fiction writing again, and took off. So
So when
I
you were
always
doing
loved,
the children's hospital, that was
yeah,
San Diego.
that was Dallas. Yeah, and I
Mm,
worked there for 2 years, and then we moved out to San Diego, and I got a similar job at one of the big healthcare systems here in San Diego, and I worked there for 6 years until I got my job now, which is at a research facility.
well, so it's interesting because I mean we both spent time in San Diego. I think
Hmm.
off and on for me, probably about 6 years. And so I think that was a cool thing when I was reading your novel. Um, Maybe it was a little nostalgia for me, but it was nice because I don't honestly, I probably don't read enough crime fiction set in San Diego. So when it was kind of refreshing for many reasons, the book is refreshing, but it was very refreshing for me, just, oh man, this is like, it's that laid back, um,
Yeah,
even as your character who's a police officer, and he's a beat cop, he's Marcuson's incredibly laid back, and just kind of on his beat. And I thought, man, this is fun. It was giving me the same vibe I got from Tapping the Source, kid
yeah, that's
novel, which
cool.
is
That's
one of the
cool.
great surfer
That's
noirs.
such a good book. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I found that there were a lot of similarities in our protagonists, but a lot of differences too. Your guy is Trevor's homicide detective trying to show his worth, and Marcus Kemp, my guy, is like you said, a beat cop and laid back and just actually not looking for advancement. He just wants to hang out and just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
But I love the tenacity of Trevor, and just how he's got to prove not only to himself, but he's trying to, obviously, without giving too much away, trying to prove his worth to his father and to his love interest and pretty much everyone around him, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. I would say that, for him, um, he never wanted to be a police officer. And so, he found himself in that profession.
Mhm.
And maybe somewhere kind of hidden inside, he looked up to his father, even though his father is not, the greatest guy, and has many shortcomings, especially in the way that he raised Trevor. And for the most of Trevor's life, he tried to steer away from that. But once, the traumatic event happens to him, how he's able to navigate his trauma and the aftermath is to join the police department. And once he's in there, he in some ways becomes very idealistic, believing that if he can excel, he could rise in the ranks, that he's going to have real impact. And he soon learns that it is a machine with many moving parts, and it is governed by politics, and those politics can be varied, but it is not as easy as he thought it was going to be.
I thought you did a, speaking of like the machine and the organization that is the LAPD, and just this huge thing. Like, I thought you did a really great job in the book of making it digestible and easy to access, and but still showing those complex layers and the complexities that job presents.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part, right? So when we're talking, especially it's contemporary. So, given what people's, given their perceptions of police, especially in the wake of the last few years, to write about it already is kind of heightened, right? So people are already somewhat sensitive about it. And some of it is cognitive dissonance when we talk about these things, because people don't want to believe that, even though they're in the paper and it's in print, these things happen in terms of,
or on video.
On video.
On video. Yeah.
Like, there's this idea that we want to believe that that's just a small number, right? That's not representational of our police departments. And to an extent, it's true, but it's really the organization as a department that has contributed to some of these incidents happening. And that's what I wanted to show, is that it's not just a few officers. I mean, these officers were made in the department. The department gave birth to this stuff. And so because of that, it becomes a culture. And Trevor has to kind of go up against this culture that he doesn't really want to be a part of. He really just kind of wants to do his job. But it's incredibly hard to do that, given the politics and given the kind of blue wall that exists within the department.
Did you find that was easy as the writer, that those conflicts, those built-in conflicts are there already to play with, that you really don't have to kind of make up anything to present as roadblocks in Trevor's journey?
Yeah, it was all kind of right there, because I remember quite a bit, from the academy days. And, I said, I went in 2014. So that was after Eric Garner, the homicide of Eric Garner at the hands of NYPD. And so that was something that was very much on the surface. And so it became part of how they trained us. This idea that you should be afraid of the person with the camera, the person who's recording, because, you'll get in trouble. Not so much, if you're doing the right thing, you shouldn't even worry about that. But they used to yell at us, let's say you're doing push-ups or something and you skip one, right? So you had 15 and you stop at 14, and they would yell, somebody's always watching, and so it'd be somebody hiding behind the bushes or something, watching you. You know what I mean? It was weird. You know what I mean? But that was the environment of their trying to, I guess, in their own way, situational awareness. But also there was an undercurrent of, like, you should be afraid of the person who, the citizen out there who's watching, because you're going to get caught doing something you're not supposed to do.
So this is kind of a broader question, but just taking a step back, why this book? Why did you feel like you needed to tell this story?
Well, I didn't really want to write a cop novel, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I fought it for many years because I felt like it was a very cluttered lane, right? I mean, there's tons of police procedurals. And so I told myself, well, if I'm going to write it, I'm going to write a character, I'm going to write a detective very much as a human being, based on the officers that I had experiences with throughout my life. And I just told myself, okay, I'm going to tell the truth, from the perspective of a Black officer who has to contend with doing their job, but at the same time, how their own community looks at them in the wake of these scandals and these police abuses. And so that was my angle. And so I said, okay, if I'm going to, sit down and write this novel, it has to be from that perspective. Because, I knew just writing a standard fare police procedural with a Black detective just wouldn't speak to my experience. It needed to be something that rang true and was honest to what I saw, and especially, the time that I was in the academy.
I think that honesty really shines through. I mean, that's the greatest thing any fiction writer can do is be honest. And I think you laid it all out there and it worked really well.
Thank you. And that's what's interesting, right? Because Marcus is a beat cop, which we don't see a whole lot of, right? So what's common is to go ahead and say, okay, I want a detective, because for better or for worse, it's easier when you have a crime that has to be solved, because the detective is right there, and you have all these layers with your detective, and your detective can kind of go on this expedition and solve this crime. But what I enjoyed about your novel was that Marcus, he doesn't have all those skills really. He's a beat cop who essentially his day-to-day function is to investigate vehicles. I mean, that's what he's investigating. I mean, in terms of investigative skills, they're there, but his job is to, investigate vehicles, and kind of on this transportation detail. And so for me, that was refreshing, because having read so many detectives in my life, I was like, okay, here's just a dude, and he's like, he's on his beat, and he's going, he's experiencing San Diego and dealing with many other things that are parallel to LA too, but such as, unhoused people, and dealing with that element of it every day, but they're not treated as one-dimensional. It's like everyone he encounters is three-dimensional characters who he probably has this relationship with because he sees them constantly.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool, approach, because it feels real, because as a cop, not every day is crazy. Some days might not be like that, so he has these days where it's kind of laid back, but then he has these days where, he finds a body in the trunk,
I love you saying that, he's just a regular dude, because that's exactly how I was coming at it. I just, him being a cop is just kind of like, it's secondary. It's, the book is really not about his police work per se. It's just he's a regular dude and he happens to be a cop, and this stuff lands in his lap, and what little power he has, he determines to kind of use it to his advantage. So I love hearing that, because that's how I pitch it too. It's just, regular dude living out his life, and then this bomb falls in his lap.
Yeah, and that's interesting in itself, right? Because when we think about kind of the mythology around police officers, we think about the mythology around the detective, right? Especially when we're dealing with crime fiction and noir.
Right.
They're heroes, right? They kind of emerge as these heroic figures, who are either taking down some conspiracy, or it's always something much bigger than them, but they are the knights in shining armor, right? And that's who we're supposed to root for. But I had a writing teacher tell me a hero is nothing but a sandwich. It's like these people are they're human beings, right? The idea is like they're just everyday people who just have heroic moments. And so when I was reading your book, I was like, okay, I was like, that's what this is. This is, Marcus is an everyday guy who, as you said, happens to be a cop, but is going through, the day-to-day fare, until he has that moment where, he finds that body in the trunk, and now his life is then on this other trajectory, where now we see the true character moments, and the layers kind of get peeled back, and we start to see what sent him on the path to become a cop, which is always to me more interesting than the actual day-to-day solving the crime. I'm more interested in why people decide to do it, truthfully, because it's not an easy job.
And I think that shows in Under Color of Law, those flashback chapters of yours and Trevor's adolescence, and the things that traumatized him and kind of pushed him towards that life as going to the police academy and becoming a cop. Like, that stuff was so fascinating, and obviously it plays in later to the plot and everything. You did a great job with tying those two together. But yeah, I found myself reading those flashback chapters just as enthralled as in the
Thank
real
you.
time chapters. Yeah, great stuff.
Appreciate that.
So let's see here. What do you want to? We've talked a lot about detectives and beat cops. What would you say sets Trevor apart from other detectives? I guess not only in his world, but in crime fiction.
Well, to start, he's a rookie detective. So the way I kind of envisioned it was he's a detective to second grade, and he, without giving a whole lot away, but essentially he became a detective faster than what happens to most folks. And so he's put into the coveted robbery homicide division, which typically has about 13 to 15, I think, detectives. And it's very coveted. It's where it's all like major crimes is where everybody wants to be. And so, he makes his path and ends up there. And, for me, I wanted to write a detective who was unsure, who's kind of already entering, as the story starts, he's already on shaky ground. He has these things in his backstory that have created kind of moral issues for him, and things that he has to kind of overcome. But I also thought it was interesting to have a character who gets what he wants, right? He becomes this detective in robbery homicide very early on in his career, but he's also hated by the other police officers because of it, right? So he gets what he wants, but it's a price to pay professionally for it. And while he thinks that he can work his way to become chief, it's really not in the cards for him, but he refuses to see that or at least acknowledge it.
And so how do you think that differs from other detectives in crime fiction, apart from him just being a rookie?
Well, I think, the detectives that I've read have often been very sure of themselves, at least to the point where there's a sense of safety when you're reading the novels. You kind of know, oh, he's going to, my detective, he or she is going to figure it out. I have faith, and I wanted to take a different approach with that. I wanted to have a detective where, just in terms of him being the narrator, where you really weren't sure how it was going to end up, because you're finding things out as Trevor's finding them out, right? So it becomes more of a visceral experience where you are literally in Trevor's shoes, and you're having this kind of vicarious experience with him on this journey. And I think that in many respects that's it differs, right? Because while yes, you could look and say Trevor Finnegan, book 1, so he's not gonna die. So it's like there's another book coming, But at the same time, there's elements of peril because you don't know what version of Trevor is gonna emerge at the end of this book. How damaged is he gonna be? And so as he discovers, himself through this crime of trying to solve the crime of the death of Brandon Soledad, the recruit, layers get peeled back as he's investigating, but it also taps into his own kind of personal layers that he's put up in this wall, and slowly but surely it starts to kind of crumble as he's forced to have to face, trauma that existed, in his young life that led him to be a cop. And so I think that approach is different because I think there's a little danger to the book.
Right.
In a way where oftentimes I read detective fiction and especially if it's dealing with a police procedural, and I'm thinking like, there's no real danger here. I think they're going to come back, and be fine at the end of this thing, and they'll have another adventure. But with this book, I wanted it to feel like, at any moment he could just say, all right, I'm done with this. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, for Bosch, right? For Michael Connelly, he originally had had this idea of having Bosch, who, come back to the police department, right? So that was kind of, at that time, that was kind of fresh. That was new, the idea that he was a cop and then he left and then he returns. And so I wanted to kind of flip that on its head and say at any minute, Trevor could be like, what, forget this. This just isn't worth it. And just kind of pack it up and go home. But because what's inside of him, his true character, won't allow him to do that, even though part of him really wishes he could, because he doesn't like the job. It doesn't bring him joy, but it's something. It's almost like it's his, his mission. It's something that he just has to do. It's a vocation that he can't shake.
Yeah, for sure. We can't give too much away about his motivations, but it's a good one. So if anyone out there hasn't read it, you need to click that button there on signed book plates available and buy under color of law. You won't regret it. So, hey, you want to get into kind of your publication journey? And
oh, yeah, sure.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so, I got started early on in my career, I was agentless. I had a agent tell me after reading some of my first book, The Science of Paul, and said, why didn't you go with a bigger publisher? And I said, well, I tried. And they said, well, what was your query letter like? So the query letter, for people who don't know, you send that out to get interest when you're trying to get an agent, or you can send it directly to a publisher. And I said, well, I said it was an existential crime novel. And the agent said, well, that's why you didn't get it. That's why it didn't work out, because you said it's an existential crime novel. And I said, well, that's what it was, So they said, yeah, but, it's these buzzwords and it's the whole commercial pitch, So For me, I think at that time, I was fine with it. I was like, you know what, I'm writing kind of offbeat novels anyway. I don't know if there was a huge market for what I was writing at the time. And so, I was okay, being published by, indie press and smaller publishers. And so when I was writing this book, though, Under Color of Law, was a little bit different, because it was a type of story where I said I wanted to have the largest readership possible. And so that's when I went more of the traditional route, and I started to look for agents. So I did a few things. I mean, obviously, you send your queries out kind of cold, but I also wanted to get feedback. So I used Manuscript Academy. And so I got feedback from different people who read it, and then even got some offers from agents through that. And then ultimately I was able to attend the International Thriller Writers conference, so the Thriller Fest. And so I got a scholarship courtesy of Jason Pinter. If you're watching, Jason, thank you. But they were so Agora, which is Jason runs that with Chantel Osman. They had a scholarship for writers of color, and so I applied for it, and then I got it. So I was able to attend the conference, and then I was able to pitch agents, and I think I pitched about 4 agents, and one of the agents that I pitched was my current agent.
You say 4 agents?
Yeah, I was able to pitch 4 agents. Yeah.
Not 400, 4.
4.
And you got one.
And
that's how good that book is.
So yeah, I was able to get an agent, and it was great. It was like, but you know what it is? I think it's hard, and I tell my students this all the time. It's hard to cold pitch, because so much of it is personality and how you click with people. And so me and Gina just clicked immediately, and her energy was so high, and she really believed in the book. And so I felt like, okay, I could work with Gina because she has that kind of passion. And that's, I seem to only really work well with people who have that passion for the writing and really love, what we're doing. And there was other agents who I had offers from 2 other agents. And, I just felt like there was something just missing there, just in terms of their understanding of the genre and really how they saw the book, and how they were thinking about marketing the book. And so there were some things there that just didn't speak to me, I guess in terms of where I thought the book should go and what was possible. And so, it worked out. And so we were able to pitch Amazon, and then Thomas and Mercer, and they love the book, and the rest is history. So
Great. And you're working on book 2, right?
Yeah, so book 2 will be out this fall. And so the
Awesome.
book 2 is Blue Like Me, and that again features Trevor Finnegan. And without giving a whole lot away, he, as the book opens, he is no longer a police detective, but he is working in, I would say, a detective capacity. But he has a completely different role, and he's going to have to contend with some of his past choices as he tries to make amends for some of the things that he did as a police officer. But it basically is going to send him down a very dangerous path, because he's going to be a witness, if you will, to another police officer's death. And that's ultimately going to impact his life in a variety of ways.
That's awesome, man. Can't wait.
Thank you.
So let's see. You want to plug some books? You want to tell me? You want to share what we've read recently and what you're digging on?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I mean, obviously, I finished your book. I finished your book 2 days ago.
Oh, sweet.
So I'm a slow reader, man. It's
No,
like,
me too, man.
So, but yes, I'll plug some books here. So obviously you should go get Curtis's book. And I will tell you why. Because not only is it a fresh take on police procedural, but what I appreciate about the book is that it's also pulling back the layers of a police officer and showing how childhood trauma can ultimately motivate us within our adult lives to become something. It ultimately can change us, right? It changes us early on. And it's interesting because we don't know what Marcus might have been had certain things not happened to him. And so for that, I think it definitely holds its place in the pantheon of cop novels, because it's willing to go places that I think a lot of cop novels shy away from. And for that, I think people definitely should check it out, because it's in many ways it's kind of a character study, but it also is dealing with this idea that cops are not necessarily, a lot of times they don't choose to be cops. They're kind of pushed into that by forces that are not, nefarious forces and forces that can be detrimental, and ultimately push them into that profession. So Curtis's book. And I'm currently reading, like I said, I'm incredibly slow, but I'm reading Gary Phillips's book, Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem, which is a lot of fun. And so I'm about halfway through that. And that's actually from Agora, the Polis imprint. And those who don't know, Gary Phillips is an OG in this crime thing, because he has been around forever. And, I'm happy to say Gary is one of I consider him a mentor and a friend. And I've learned a lot from he and Gar Anthony Haywood. Both of them have kind of, helped me in a variety of ways,
Awesome.
throughout my career. And so like I said, I'm slow. So I'm halfway through Gary's book, and, I was reading yours. So I only balance 2 at a time. Otherwise I can't get anything done, because I'll just end up reading all day.
Well, you shouldn't feel bad. I'm in the middle of Every Hidden Thing by Ted Flanagan. Very cool book. Man, I feel like I've been working on it for a month now, but I think it's mainly just because it's so good It's one of those books where you're like, as a writer, you're taking notes and you're like, I see how you did that. I see how you did that. Like you end up rereading passages like 2-3 times because they're so good. So that's a great read. And then before your book, I finished And Now She's Gone by
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Rachel Hall. Just
That's an excellent
incredible.
book.
Set in LA. Very cool vibe. Like she brings a totally different vibe of LA than I think I've read before.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. And then just want to shout out the short story collection by my buddy JB Stevens, a Therapeutic Death.
Okay,
It's
I've
out
seen
by
that.
Yeah, it's
Tell
out.
me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a collection of his short stories, and I'd say it's predominantly flash fiction, but it's a mix of crime, military, because JB's a veteran, and then also a couple. I think there's a couple of comedy stories in here. If I can't quite remember, but yeah, it says it's crammed with twisted thrills, dark secrets, and elusive grasp at redemption.
Wow.
So
Okay.
quick read, good read. Yeah.
I'll put that
And
on the
then,
list.
of course, why we're here, Under Color of Law. Yeah. And it's so good. And I hope everyone buys a copy and checks it out. Get ready for Trevor Finnegan book 2 in the fall. That'll be great.
Yeah, I think hopefully I'll keep it going. Because
Do you have an idea? Do you have a number in mind?
Maybe 4 or 5.
Okay.
I think, and that has more to do with me in attention span. Just and at the same time, it's other books that I wanna focus on. What I'm writing now is a little bit. Definitely not another police procedural, but it is noir. But it's inspired by Patricia Highsmith, who I love, and so that's my current work in progress. Kind of the talented Mr. Ripley set in the world of hip hop, and because I think there's sociopaths in a lot of industries, and hip hop is one of them. So. I'm kind of interested in that, so that's what I'm working on now.
That's awesome. So right now, I started a novel and I've kind of stopped that novel, and actually I'd love to get you offline and talk to you about it. I need a little motivation. I need a little direction. So we'll get offline and talk about that. But yeah, working on a few short stories. Got a couple short stories out on submission. So yeah, trying to stay busy, trying to keep writing. Yeah. Are you going to any? Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to ask if people can meet you in person anytime soon. Are you going out and doing any live events?
Yes, so I will be at Thriller Fest, which is in May. Mm-hmm. So Under Color of Law is actually nominated for a Thriller Award. So I will be there. Also will be giving a workshop while I'm there as part of Craft Fest. And that workshop is going to focus specifically on conflict and writing kind of the fundamentals of conflict and how conflict is really the lifeblood of fiction, especially for us as crime writers. We have to have very layered conflicts within our stories. And so I'll be giving a workshop there. And then I have plans to go to attend VoucherCon. And I also will be at the LA Times Festival of Books. I'll be on a panel with Joe Ide. So Joe gave us IQ, the IQ novels. So
it's awesome. Excellent. Yeah, I'll be at VoucherCon, so we'll get a drink, maybe a few. Yeah. And then before that, yeah.
It's well, I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know what to do because it's Minnesota, right? So I don't know what to do with myself in Minnesota.
I've never been either. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Sounds good.
Do we, let's see, we have a few questions. You want to take some of these?
Yeah, let's do it.
I was just gonna pop on
So,
to make sure we got to those questions, but
yeah, we're
I
going to
hit the
get to them
camera
right
button. You said that, so I will go back away.
now. Thanks, Matt. What is your process for writing the mystery element of your novel? Do you know going in exactly how it will unfold, or do you surprise yourself ever as you write along with your detective?
I would say in the beginning it's an outline, and so I outline the whole book, and my outlines are not highly detailed. It's really just chapter by chapter, and I'll have bullet points that'll say, okay, I know exactly what needs to happen within these chapters. But so much of writing is discovery, so as I say,
Right.
it's a blueprint because a lot of that ultimately changes, and then I write these outlines in a composition book. So by the time I'm almost done with the manuscript, the composition book is full. And sometimes I'll actually cross out parts of the outline and write it again, just kind of as I go along. Because inspiration will hit and you'll say, oh, it's going a completely different direction.
Yeah. Right.
And so I give myself kind of that freedom. But in terms of writing, in terms of knowing the character and knowing the main character and their motivations, I always kind of go into it knowing that that's very clear, kind of going in. And so if there's a crime and they're investigating, then yeah, I kind of go along with the ride because I'm not always sure how those characters will react. Some of it is just the characters that do stuff. It'll pop in my head and I'm like, oh, that's what that character would do. That makes sense,
Yeah.
And so even for me as a writer, there's elements of, discovery and twists that kind of come out of nowhere and just are kind of inspired by me going through the process of thinking about story, and writing it. So
Yeah, I think one thing about Under Color of Law that we had talked about before was kind of the mystery of it isn't like the crime in itself. It's kind of Trevor and his life and peeling that onion back. That's
yeah,
kind of the mystery, and it obviously all works together and connects, but I think that's what makes your book so unique.
thank you.
All right, let's go to another question. How do you both approach writing about Southern California, a place which is so heavily represented in the media? Is it easier to write about than other locales?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's easy to write about other locales. I mean, my first two novels are set in North Carolina, um, in rural North Carolina at that. So, for a long time, I didn't write about LA, just because it's so many stories. It's so much sprawl that it can be kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think that as I've gotten older, I write from a point of nostalgia. And so having grown up in Pasadena, LA in general is the victim of the wrecking ball. So I can go down, one street and remember what it was like in '89, and ask somebody on the corner, hey, do you remember you remember what this used to be? And they'll look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what are you saying? It's a Cheesecake Factory. It's like, no, that was a movie theater, So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I write from that standpoint of this kind of nostalgic tone, for a city that is constantly changing and being kind of revised and redrawn, and people are kind of being pushed out and gentrification, all sorts of things are happening. At least in my fiction, I can stop that in a way, right? So there's places
Right.
that are in Under Color of Law that exist in the book that are gone, but I can write those in.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I'm still kind of trying to find my way because I'm not a native San Diegan. I've lived here going on 9 years. And so I think if you read my book, you kind of, you'll notice that Marcus is a transplant, right? And
Mhm.
kind of the city is taken through his transplant eyes, and those are pretty much my eyes. And just him falling in love with the things in San Diego that I've fallen in love with. And that's probably how I'll continue to write about San Diego, is just the things that I love about the city and not try to get into the history because I don't know it. And what I know, like you said, is similar to LA, where it's like what I say it happened 20 years ago, you know, it could have three different, variations of that. And San Diego's grown so much just in the time that I've been here.
Yeah.
It's a lot like Southern California. It's just constantly changing. So I think the really cool thing about Southern California and LA and San Diego, respectively, is that there's so many pockets of each city that you can really just concentrate on one neighborhood and it being emblematic of the whole city and the whole region in some ways. So I think that that's makes writing about our cities and our region exciting and will continue to be vibrant, at least for me. And then kind of talking about nostalgia for you, that nostalgia played a role where Marcus goes back to Texas, where I lived for 20 years, and that's kind of how I saw most of my childhood through, and so nostalgia kind of comes out in those chapters. So, but I love writing about Southern California and San Diego in particular. Like there's so many different things going on, and it's just a total vibe. So it's great to write about.
And I mean, as you noted, it is transplant heavy. When I lived there, because you have the military, you have a lot of people who come there for work. But yeah, I mean, when I was in San Diego, that was a very interesting thing, because it wasn't I didn't work with a whole lot of native Southern Californians, so it was like a lot of people came from cold places, or like the Midwest, and San Diego is one of those cities too, where you can escape. It's a place where Southern California in general, but I would say San Diego is like, if you really are just looking for a new start, there's something about that city that kind of allows for it.
It definitely embraces you, and like anything goes here. Like, in most of the neighborhoods, I mean, people are very welcoming and accepting and just kind of let you do your thing. But I'm the same. Like whenever I find a true native, I'm like, oh, what was this like 40 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever the case may be? Like it kind of trips me out. Like there's this highway that runs through the regional park where I live behind, that wasn't here like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And I'm always asking people, like my neighbors lived here all his life. I'm like, what was it like then? He's like, oh, we used to take our dirt bikes out there and just tear through the mountains and the canyons. I'm like, man, that blows my mind. And I always tell people, I moved here at the right time. If I would have gone to college here or gone here to high school here, I would have never got anything done. There's too much to do.
It's true. I mean, once the beach gets a hold of you, it's like you find yourself there like every weekend.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's see. Someone wants to know if you had to watch one police procedural on TV for the rest of your life, which one would you choose and why?
That's a hard question. Wow. Okay, I would say it's a tie. So I would say it's a tie between Boomtown and Southland, which were both they're set in Los Angeles. But I love Boomtown because it was essentially a show that was told from different points of view. And so you got to see the crime from different points of view. But it also had one of the coolest detectives, played by Michael T. Williamson, Bubba from Forrest Gump. But he was this character named Fearless, and he was this black detective. And he was just a brilliant black detective who had something in his past that drove him to become a police officer. But it was just a very interesting character, just in terms of how he approached the job. And so I could see if I had to only pick one, I would say that Boomtown would be it. But that's because of the character Fearless.
Yeah, nice. I haven't checked. I have to check that out. I haven't watched that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you love, cop shows, I would say that it's probably like my top show, along with Homicide, Life on the Street, which was great too.
Nice. So if you were able to cast anyone to be your main character in a movie of your book, who would you cast and why?
This is another hard question.
Dream stuff, man. You gotta have this down.
You know what? Because I have so many people in mind. Now, some people have told me, Anthony Mackie, but I think he might be a little too old. For me, I'm kind of leaning toward, a younger. It would have to be a younger actor, but I don't know. It's hard to say. I like the for those who watch it, Issa Rae's show has a young man. Her show is done now, but Insecure has a young man who plays Nathan on there. And I think that when I think of Trevor, I think that he would be a good fit. I can't call his name right now, but he embodies the character, and I think he could definitely do that for sure.
Nice. All right. Last question. We kind of already covered this, but maybe something coming up that you're excited about. What books have you been most excited to read recently?
Well, I mean, yeah, like I said, the books that I read, but I guess books that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
So Alex Segura, his book that's coming out, I'm definitely interested in that. So that's
that's got to hit the nostalgia for you, right?
Yeah, because I like comic books, which is I can't call the name right now.
Secret Identity.
Secret Identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in checking that out. Obviously, Sean Cosby. I'm waiting for what he's going to do next. I have a feeling, just based on things I've seen, that it might be a police procedural. So I'm interested to see what his take is, on that subgenre. So those are the books that I'm that are on my very short list. But like I said, I'm a notoriously slow reader, and I have it's funny because in my phone I have a whole list that goes back probably like 2 years.
Yeah.
And so, and like when I get a opportunity,
we don't even get into to be read piles. Mine are like toppling at this point.
It's ridiculous, But for I have an excuse. So I have I got a 2-year-old. So
that's
if you got a 2-year-old.
That's not an excuse. That's a reason. That's a good one. For sure.
Yeah.
For me, I got I hope I don't mess up her name. Amina Akhtar has Kismet coming out.
Kismet, yeah.
Yeah, and I've got it on pre-order, and I'm stoked on that premise. Like I can't wait to read that, and then like you said, anything Sean puts out. I mean, Blacktop Wasteland and Razorblade Tears are just incredible. Mm-hmm. So I mean, he could write the phone book, and I'll read it. So yeah. And then, of course, book 2 of Trevor Finnegan. I can't wait for that. It's in the fall. That's awesome.
Yeah. So as of now, it's November. You know how that goes, though. It could change, but I believe it's November 6th, I think. So yeah. So I actually just saw last week I saw the cover design, and I was like, oh, okay. It's like it's not real, right? Until you see the cover design. You're like, oh, I get it now. Like,
Did you dig it?
Yeah, it's a very cinematic cover design, and it really captures the spirit of the second book.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because what Trevor's doing is incredibly lonely, and I think that the cover captures that. To be this kind of rogue detective.
Yeah.
It's a lonely way.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, man, it's been so great talking to you, and I hope everyone that tuned in enjoyed this and enjoyed listening to us talk about crime fiction and our books, and it was a great time. Appreciate
Thank you.
Mysterious Galaxy for hosting. Appreciate
Definitely.
it, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Everyone go out
Great.
and support your indie bookstore.
Yep, definitely hit that sign book plates button and grab your copies of all of these books. And I just want to say that like crime fiction has been a new thing that I've added during the pandemic, but it's been such a great addition because like I think maybe both of you have hinted at it's been really hard to read right now. But something about crime fiction has really done it for me personally, and I'm really excited to have learned more about your books and check them out. And yeah, with that, thanks to everyone for coming.
Thank you.
And we will
thank
see you hopefully in the real world. I know we'll be at the Festival of Books, maybe a thriller
Okay.
as well, but we'll see you all out there.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.